So good to see you again, Jörg. We met in July this year in Munich, last time in my old function as a music director of the music department of the Goethe Institute, now in a new function here in Boston as the new director of the Goethe Institute. And when we met, we were talking how great it would be to meet personal in Boston at the 18th of November concerning the American premiere of the new trumpet concert. But due to schedule reasons, this is not possible personal. Well, it is like it is. So I'm happy that we're going to meet each other in remote, and you have some time and talk about this premiere of this very interesting new piece. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the genesis of this project. Who was the one who was saying, well, let's have a commission with Jörg? Why was it a trumpet concert? Who was the one who was doing that? Because I remember that you composed a trumpet concert already, maybe 20 years ago, or even a little bit longer. And so you get a feeling to this format, and you got experience with another soloist. And I'm quite interested in how this comes together.
You're absolutely right. The first trumpet concerto I wrote, not knowing that it's my first of two so far, I think there will not be an explicit trumpet concerto anymore, because in Towards Paradise, which I wrote for Leipzig and Boston, I gave everything. To me, it's not only because we talked today and I only some months ago, I finished the piece. It's one of the most important pieces for myself I've written so far. But you are right, it's also impossible to conceive it without the first trumpet concerto, which is called Ad Absurdum. So it represents, as the title suggests, almost absurd virtuosity. So the piece already starts on a kind of climactic moment. And the piece will not leave this speed anymore. It's a 12-minute long duration, with the exception of the last 2 minutes, because the tempo gets faster than that, because of a barrel organ. So it's a mechanical thing. So he can even play faster than Sergei Nakaryakov, who was the fantastic soloist for my first trumpet concerto, Ad Absurdum. So you asked me who approached me. It was Andris Nelsons, the conductor, and Håkan Hardenberger, the soloist, because I was in residence with the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra for their anniversary season some years ago. When was it? 2 years ago, something. I wrote a piece for them, which, by the way, was also a co-commission with Boston Symphony Orchestra. The piece was called Partita, and I played concerts with the orchestra, and I played chamber music a lot. I was a lot there, and there was I think a portrait concert of mine in the small hall, and Andris and Håkan came to it, and in the interval they came to me and they approached me, and I think by that time it was already clear that I would write it, but they came together to me to say how important it is for them. And it's also interesting to keep in mind that Andris himself, he is a trumpet player. When I was for the Partita in Boston, every orchestra musician in Boston and in Leipzig can confirm what I'm saying. He plays in every free second, So when I came to him to discuss my score, he was playing trumpet. So for Andris, this piece means a lot. And now after the premiere in Leipzig, which I cannot say any differently, which we celebrated together, and Andris, even, which is unusual for him, gave a speech in German before the piece was played, just to tell the audience what a special moment it is for him and for the orchestra to premiere this new piece. So I can feel for Håkan and for Andris, this piece means a lot, and I could not imagine better and more fantastic and more, they know my music intimately. Andris has been doing my music for many years, And with Håkan, I've been working closely together. And to imagine already in the writing process that this music will be played by these two wonderful orchestras, unique orchestras, Leipzig Gewandhaus and Boston Symphony Orchestra. What a privilege for a composer to write for fantastic musicians like that.
Yeah, we are really looking forward. I want to ask you, because you mentioned that you have been a close relationship to Håkan Hardenberger. I can imagine writing a piece means on the same hand, going deep in the facilities of the soloist. And I think, well, I guess that you had a very close contact while you were writing the piece and trying to figure out what parts of this score are playable, or how long can he play, when did he need a rest or something like that, or maybe special sound effects. I had the possibility to have a little view on the score, and I saw some interesting things in it. Maybe you can say something about that.
So with every performer I write for, at some point there is at least one conversation, and most of the time even a session, you know, really listening to the instrument, asking the performer questions. And we met in Munich, actually, when he played with Bayerischer Rundfunk. So we met at the Herkules Saal in Munich. And after his rehearsal in his artist room for many hours. Before that, we had a Zoom session. But the most important thing was really when I heard him literally in one room. Because for me, the trumpet is a special instrument, because in my youth in Munich, I had the privilege to hear 3 times Miles Davis live. And for me, Miles Davis is one of the most important influences. Everybody who knows me and my music knows that. For me, it's equally important than Mozart, Schumann, Alba Hamberg, Messiaen. I would put him on the same level, and he was a very important influence for me. So writing a trumpet concerto, a lyrical trumpet concerto, maybe that's important because to mention, because Håkan, he said, well, that's not my way of playing the ad absurdum, you know, but I know other music of you, and I would wish, you know, a kind of lyrical trumpet concerto from you. So I said, I was not sure if I can do it. So I have to think many weeks about it, and it was not easy at the beginning at all, because the trumpet is a special instrument and a noble instrument, because even the most beautiful melodies, I think, they never get sentimental with the trumpet, because the trumpet is, and also with how much taste Håkan plays, it touches your heart, but it gets never sentimental, and that I love. Because with a sentimental instrument, you don't have to open the doors towards paradise. Do it somewhere else. But in paradise, you need something else. I can express maybe better in music than in words. And what Håkan showed me in this rehearsal room in Munich was why Miles played sometimes really to the floor. You know, he put the trumpet to. Everybody talks about the fact that he turned his back to the audience. And so he said, that's one thing, but it makes its difference in sound. And being a musician myself, I was surprised, to tell you the truth. And then he showed me what a sound difference it makes when he then takes the trumpet up and plays with full projection into the hall. That was the moment when I knew, oh, the piece will be something about motion too. And during that process, I could feel very strongly the whole piece has to be a journey. So that when the idea came from this little motion that he walks through all orchestra groups. So that was the moment probably when this idea started, I think, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Looking at the score for some minutes, that was an interesting part when I realized that there is a lot of motion from the soloists on the stage. And not only motion, in my opinion, there is some correspondence between different musicians and the soloists in the orchestra. Is it something what you really intended to explore the possibilities of this situation on stage, that there is a soloist which is free to move, well, somehow free, because you wrote exactly where he has to go. And we don't want to spoil it that much in the beginning, because there should be some surprise for the audience attending at the 18th, 19th, and 20th of November. But maybe you can say something about the principle, why he's going where, and besides the sound effects you mentioned.
Well, it's a very good observation you made, and I think we cannot see it separately from the fact that during that time, or during most of the time when I wrote the piece, we were not able to travel as musicians, to make music for others, because there were lockdowns. I think the piece would be different. And also the fact, or the question, if the soloist moves, and I liked what you said, we have to create the illusion that he is free in moving, which we weren't for such a long time. But as birds and human beings, we need the contact, and we need the ability. I don't mean it in a literal sense to fly. I mean it in a philosophical sense. We have to meet. We need exchange. So maybe this desire in myself to let the soloist move from continent to continent, orchestral continent to continent, or group of people to another group, maybe came from the impossibility to meet many people in that time. It sounds very simple, but I think it was like that. And this curiosity, that's why we travel. That's why you are in Boston right now, for many other reasons. We are curious. We are curious for other cultures. We are happy if other people are interested in our cultures. So it's such, or what the Goethe Institute does, that's the core of what's important for human beings. So maybe it has this kind of utopian title, because the reality was how it was. I think it has a lot to do with that.
Thank you very much. There's a subtitle called Labyrinth VI, and I learned that there is a series of compositions with these titles starting many years before Labyrinth I. Maybe you can explain a little bit why this trumpet concert is one of those in this row of Labyrinth concerts.
For a long time, I was pretty sure this piece would be called Solitude Concerto, because of the isolation, not of myself necessarily, but of all of us, of this lack of communication, which we all experienced in different ways. And it did something with all of us. And as soon as I had this paradise idea, and the idea that the soloist should, discover the different orchestra groups by walking from group to group. By the way, sometimes he's even rejected by the groups. In the end, when he goes to his fellow trumpet players, they reject him clearly. And all the three of them, they will play, they kind of say, go somewhere else, don't stay here. So it's not only paradise, it's also a labyrinth, and this famous sentence by Camus, we have to imagine Sisyphus as I don't know how it's literally in English, but as a happy, individual, So as soon as these ideas, this paradise idea was clear, it was also important for me that this walk through the orchestra is not straight on. It's a labyrinth. Labyrinth still is a wonderful metaphor for our life today, for modern life. And as you mentioned, I have this cycle of labyrinths. My last labyrinth was premiered at the place where I sit right now. I'm in the Barenboim Said Academy in Berlin right now. And as you know, Frank Gehry built this fantastic Boulez Hall. And Daniel Barenboim with the Boulez Ensemble premiered my Labyrinth #4 in an unforgettable premiere here. It's for singer, for soprano, high soprano, and ensemble. All my Labyrinths so far are scored for different scorings, big orchestra. Labyrinth #5, which was written at the same time with the Labyrinth VI, the Towards Paradise, by the way, is for one soprano only. You know, a woman kind of trying to find herself. You know, so it was written in the same time as this huge orchestra piece. You mentioned you have looked at my score. So already the scoring or even the percussion setup is big. Exactly. So, of course, we were still in the lockdowns when I wrote the piece. So I wrote Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra and Boston Symphony. Would it be okay if I write really a big orchestration, which was my desire? And I expected, to be honest, that the answer would be no. I suspected that the answer would be, please write us a piece for a Beethoven size orchestra, you know. But they both said, no, you're free to write for a bigger combination, and I happily did so.
I can imagine that.
Exactly. Because, you know, there was a certain time when we all said, well, Schoenberg, Gurelieder, you know, Mahler 8, these pieces will never be performed anymore, you know. And we all did projects, and rightly so, for small ensembles, and it was a good thing. And one of the good things we learned in the Corona crisis, I think, as musicians, a program does not always have to be 2 hours long, you know, and does not necessarily have to have an interval. Sometimes 1 hour without interval is enough. And it's a very rich thing to experience. I think in Boston, it's fantastic because normally an overture is added. But since I think Mahler First Symphony, I hope I'm right, Mahler First Symphony is played in the second half, we decided not to have an overture, but only the trumpet concerto and then Mahler 1. And I like this idea a lot. Even more, I regret that I will miss it, but it's only owed to the fact that I have 4 lives at the same time, conducting, playing, teaching. So I'm on stage that night myself, so I have to apologize, but I'm with all my thoughts there, and already with the performers, with Andris Nelsons and with Håkan Hardenberger, we are exchanging texts. Oh, we can't wait till Boston and so on. And maybe one more aspect, which is interesting, because trumpet is such a specific instrument. There is such a specific American trumpet and brass tradition. You know, all these famous, you know, not only the big 5 in the United States, but really everywhere. The brass sound is so different from Europe, you know? And we already said how Håkan's sound would blend with this amazing Boston Symphony brass section and with the trumpet group, without telling too much. But at the beginning, there's a dialogue between the orchestra, principal trumpet in the orchestra, and with the soloist. And this for sure will sound so different from Gewandhaus, which was wonderful. It was the same with the partita. It was the same piece. But so interesting for me how different the sounds were, but even more with Towards Paradise, because it would not be possible without my early Miles Davis experience and jazz experience. So that's very interesting how this will sound with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And concerning the jazz tradition and the American brass tradition, in a way, this piece comes home when it comes to Boston, in a way.
Thank you for that. A last question, because you mentioned the reason why you couldn't be here in Boston is linked with your other activities, which are, well, it's a huge range of activities you have. And as you said, you're working as a clarinetist, a soloist. conductor as well, and you compose. If you look on your schedule, on the 24 hours you can spend each day, is there any part of that which needs more efforts or more time than the other one? Because I think you have to sleep somewhere. Maybe you have to practice sometimes.
Oh, yes.
Maybe you have to look on scores if you conduct a new piece.
Yes.
How do you manage that?
Well, the only thing I can say, sometimes I regret that the day has only 24 hours. No, joking aside, I need to sleep. Very important. But to be honest, in the last weeks of writing Towards Paradise, there was hardly any sleep anymore. And I know it from other pieces of mine, because in the end, you know, in the last phase of a period of writing such a piece, there is hardly anything else, you know, than the piece. And of course, my body is tired sometimes. And then I go to sleep, or I try to turn out the light and I try to sleep. But, you know, the double basses ask me if I want to sleep. They continue. So most of the time I turn on the light and I continue with the double basses, because they would not let me sleep anyway. So sometimes it would be more horrible to sleep, to try to sleep desperately, than to wake up again and to continue. And therefore, it's so important to relax also afterwards. And I can explain it in that way, maybe. I relax from composing a piece like, you know, it's almost 40 minutes long, this piece. You know, it took me a long time. It's a huge score. It's one of my biggest scores in the amount of notes, you know, I've written. So for me, it's relaxing in a way when then I go on tour with an orchestra and I conduct and I play the clarinet again. And then also the other way around, after having met many people on tour every night, being in contact with wonderful musician friends and audiences, and wonderful experiences, then it's equally important to close your door. And then I go back to my beloved home city, Munich, or to Berlin, where I live now in the last 5 years. So I live now in Munich and in Berlin. And this time is sacred for me. I just come back from Scotland. I conducted BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra with Schumann too, and my own piece, Conbrio, and I played Weber concerto. You can imagine my muscles, my bones, my body hurts. I'm exhausted. We did the concert 2 times. We rehearsed for a week. I traveled back home. I'm back home in Berlin for 3 days now. My luggage hasn't arrived. So I'm on the phone constantly. So these things take away more energy from me than finally composing 1 week in a row, you know. So these things are much more distracting and taking away energy. I'm grateful that I'm allowed to do all these different fields in music, and I'm simply grateful that I'm allowed to do it.
Dear Jörg, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy calendar, sharing the time with us, and we are all looking forward to the premiere of the concert on the 18th of November, and we will tell you how it was in Boston. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, and was so good to talk to you, and I will be with you and in Boston and with the Symphony Orchestra with all my thoughts on that day. And I can assure you the performance, Håkan Hardenberger and Andris Nelsons, they can't wait for these Boston concerts to happen. And I will be with you with all my thoughts.
We can't wait either. Bye, Jörg.
All very best. Bye-bye.